Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Celeste A. Frazier, the Reverend. Reverend Frazier is an associate minister at Unity of Washington, D.C. She's been a spiritual leader of 3 centers for spiritual living, and she has spoken across the country at New Thought centers and regional and international conferences. She is the stimulating podcaster of Mystic Magic. She's a warm counselor who sees the beauty in you. She is a visioning facilitator. She does excellent visioning. I brought her in with my ladies and phenomenal. And she's a passionate teacher and healer. Reverend Celeste has directed outreach ministries as a performer and produced screenwriter. Her books are available on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle, and her website is celestefrazier.com. And she is, I think, kind of the brains, or at least one of the brains behind the, give me the full name.
Celebrating Our Soul.
Celebrating Our Souls, yeah. She came together with this, which is now a phenomenal event that people look forward to. So I want you to put your hands together, open your ears wide, and clap for Reverend Celeste.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna not cry because just to feel the love from Jackie and Robert and everybody just trying to set this up for me is wonderful. So thank you for your love. That's really important to me. So I discovered INTA in California somewhere between the late 90s and the early 2000s. And I was studying at Agape. And then all of a sudden I was in ministerial school. That wasn't planned. Then Agape left United Church of Religious Science after it had become United Centers for Spiritual Living. And then I went to Chicago and opened up a center in Chicago. And that's where I met Mary Beth and Michael and Lisa and Jackie and all these wonderful Chicago New Thought people. And we were just one community. We never really saw each other as separate. And because that's kind of my consciousness, that I never saw them as separate. And so I've been a member of Agape, UCRS, UCSL, worked on a conference team for ICSL, graduated from Agape in the morning and Centers for Spiritual Living in the afternoon. Attended my first AGNT conference in 1998. I've been to CUT often, and I've been a presenter at INTA before, and I'm a founding member of PADNTG. Is that enough alphabets for you? So it was interesting because I've always said that I am New Thought, period. Like, I don't need to say anything more than that. Now, I've mentioned some of these in this slide. I've certainly I think my most recent membership is ANTN, ANTN, right? Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And so I don't really understand why there has to be so many different letters, but I'm good because I just want to be able to just love God in any way that I need to. I think he told me to push one button, but I don't know if that's the button that's working. So I'm gonna hit another button. Yeah, see that happened when I touched another button. So I grew up Catholic, and then at some point I became a Baptist, and then I became AME, which is African Methodist Episcopal, and now I'm New Thought. And I'm happy to say that I can now go to a Catholic service or any denomination, any kind of religious service, and not have to spend my time deciphering their language into new thought because I think new thought now, and I don't need to distract myself from the truth thinking about how much they've got it wrong. I can just be here now, like Ram Dass says, right? I can visit ashrams and temples and mosques and simply allow myself to commune. That's what this is all about. I care less about communion with a wafer than I do about embracing the presence of God, the presence of love, really, because love has really got to be my focus, because this is the only thing that is real. Everything else is nonsense, because love feeds me. I do not have to be spoon-fed with your experience of God, because I'm already in relationship with the presence that is never in absence. And so, because thoughts are things, I would rather not clutter my mind. It's like I would rather not clutter my house, but I do at times. And then I come into my right mind and start throwing stuff out. Sometimes we have to throw stuff out of our minds and not just keep bringing stuff into our minds. So now I'm choosing a course of discluttering rather than decluttering, right? Because, you know, there's certain things that we want to deny, although they're right there in our face, and not to say that we dismiss them, but notice what you are noticing. And so for those of you who have problems with politics, I'm just going to ask you to breathe for a moment. When a certain politician was shot, as were others, I went to my junk file and pulled up some facts and decided that I knew what really happened, which was based on a set of opinions that I had on the shelf of my mind until I needed to use that set of beliefs. Beliefs which have no value to me. Why? Because they bring me no peace. Then, last night, while catching a glimpse, I saw the vulnerability on the television of a person who had worked so hard to cover up his fragility, looking totally human. This brought me relief. And I want you to really get that this whole idea that INTA has about evolving, it's really interesting, because I know that when I allow love to take up all the space in my thoughts, and every piece of cluttered opinions, beliefs, and facts dissolve. There's no room for them because love takes up all the space. In the Bible, you can call this old thought if you want to. Song of Solomon says, I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. As the lily among the thorns, so is my love amongst all the daughters. And so we have to understand that there is this idea of a rose of Sharon. And what that rose is representing is a level place. It's like a coastal plain between the mountains of central Israel and the Mediterranean Sea. And it's like this beautiful flower that has come to really be this lily amongst the thorns. And so it says, and so is my love among the daughters. So the rose of Sharon grows in dry conditions. And the rose of Sharon is the Christ in us. And the Christ in us does not require perfect conditions. The rose of Christ is just basically saying, I am that I am. And so the lily is the church. And of course, it's not a building. It's the way that we bring people together by right of consciousness into an awareness of the presence that we all share, that has its beingness in and as and through our lives. And so I am a level place between the mountains where my mind isn't cluttered. I have an exalted state of mind where the divine plan may be perceived. That's what happens when I'm in my meditation. That's not happening when I'm sitting up there criticizing somebody else and what they should be doing, right? And so it's in that space that I'm able to know the vastness and the depth and the mystery of God. And so in that awareness, it's just like the ocean's vastness. So when we're talking about between the mountains and the sea, we're talking about in the expansive awareness of the highest heights, which is the divine mind, and to the seas, the deepest parts of ourselves. And so as we think about this, it's important for us to know that as we think about this whole idea of evolving and the principles of International New Thought Alliance to affirm God as mind, as infinite being, as spirit, as ultimate reality. They're not just words. They're the essence of our being. And when we talk about God being supreme, we're talking about that is the most important thing. And all of this other stuff is irrelevant. That which is universal is that not only that unites us, but it is our capacity to be able to communicate with each other across the world. It doesn't matter what the economic class is. It doesn't matter what the religiosity is. It doesn't matter what the race is. It doesn't matter what the gender is. It doesn't matter what the sexuality is. That which is universal is not only unique in us, but absolutely is the only thread of hope that we have for being able to not only to communicate, but to really be able to have impact on each other when we come from that lily place. And so that is what INTA is talking about when it talks about affirming the unity of God and humanity. It's our divine nature. And so to know that when we affirm that which dwells within us and expresses through each of us is to expect God without making a certain judgment, without choosing to believe something about someone with some kind of a preconceived notion. You can call it racism. You can call it bigotry. You can call it, I can't remember the word for hating women, but you can call it whatever it is. You could be homophobic if you don't believe that people should be together who have the same gender. Whatever those categories that you put yourself in that may separate you from the whole, that's not God working in your life. That's some kind of confusion that's happening in our lives. If we allow ourselves to be influenced by anything that is about separation, then we are out of sync with our real self. And so when INTA affirms an acceptance of this divine nature, that's what Myrtle knew when she decided to say, you know what? I believe in the power of God to heal me. I do not inherit sickness. And so it's important for us to know that all of this supply that we're seeking is not outside of us. And I know that you know this. I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to remind you that love is our essence, that life is that which moves through us as the very highest that we are, that truth is that which we understand when we are tuned in to our divine mind. And yes, we have divine mind because we're made out of the substance. It's not about the flesh. And so the beauty that we're able to recognize in each other only comes because we're looking through the eyes of love. And so when we look at that wonderful opportunity to be at peace, it's when we are choosing to absolutely align with the divine mind, the divine heart, the divine substance. And so I just want to really be with this whole idea of this love ethic. I want to look at the Good Samaritan, for example. So the Good Samaritan parable invites us to love directly. We don't want to love directly, do we? We don't want anybody to think that we're vulnerable, so we don't really want people to know that, okay, there's a part of me that really, really, really appreciates you, and there's a part of me that really, really accepts you, and there's a part of me that really, really yearns to be in your presence, and there's a part of me who really, really feels lifted when I'm in your presence. And those are the kinds of things that love feels like, right? And so if we can love directly, if we can love clearly, then I can say to you, Lisa, I love you. I may not have seen you in years, but I love you because I love how I feel when you see me. I love how I feel when Mary Beth tells me that she loves me. I love how that feels when Michelle smiles at me. And so what I'm telling you is that I see the God in you and I celebrate her tremendously. And that's me borrowing for color girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. So scripture says, love those of Israel who didn't agree with the truth that Jesus shared about God, or what Jesus shared about loving the Samaritan or the Roman. See, imagine just being pure love and walking around and just helping people when they're down, right? That's what a Christ consciousness does, right? Now, what would it be like if we were all serving as a vehicle, not using somebody to get something, but using our lives to carry someone else to their divinity? That's why I guess what we did when we signed up for ministry. I don't know about you, but right? So think about Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman, right? And think about how Jesus had to love the Romans. The Romans came in there, they're like, we running this. Y'all better get in line, better get in order. So when Jesus was talking about how our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, it was like, you ain't running nothing in my life. I know who's running my life. And sometimes we forget because it seems like all the information that is coming to us through the television, through the internet, and all of this is that somebody else is running this agenda. And that's what happens when we become sheep who are not following the real shepherd. And for us to get caught up in who's going to be this in this position and who's going to be in that position is really all about how our energy is being directed and lifted to be able to lift the planet and not to keep talking about what's wrong with the world. Hello, somebody. But Jesus being nice to the Samaritans and Jesus being nice to the Romans made the Jewish people think that Jesus wasn't on their side because he was loving everybody. And so when you have this whole concept of you got to choose sides, then how does love fit into that paradigm? Because it's not real. Love's not going to fit in any place where it's not welcome. You can't know it. You can't feel it. You can't give it unless you embrace it and absolutely commit yourself to love. And so I want us to think about some of the things that are personal enemies to love. Just so you know what to look out for when love starts, kind of fading into the distance. You may have a personal enemy because perhaps, it's somebody, it could be somebody's intimate, right? I'm not even just talking about, sexually or anything like that. It could be somebody in your family. I ain't say it. Don't throw rocks at me. It could be somebody in your neighborhood. It could be your next door neighbor. Somebody parking somewhere you don't want them to park. somebody showing up in a way that you don't want them to show up, all of a sudden it becomes personal, right? So whether it's a family feud, whether it's somebody with a vicious tongue, you know, we let people mess up our day because we take things in a certain way that feels offensive to us. But the Christ consciousness requires us to reconcile. The Christ consciousness calls for us to really confess the errors that we have without necessarily spending all the time thinking about somebody else's error. And so if we could just take a moment to do some self-realization, hey, somebody should have that as a spirituality. If we have some self-realization and we can sit, which is, you know, I had that requirement to go to a silent retreat, so I went to the self-realization retreat, okay? And then the Bible says, for those of you who care about the Bible, I'm not saying it's the only spiritual book, reconcile with your brother before bringing God a gift. Like how you gonna have aught with somebody and then talk about, I love you, God. Well, he's God, she's God, they're God. How are you gonna have problems with somebody else and then say you love God? There's nothing outside of God. And so Jesus was teaching that, you know, regardless of what the ruling people say, because at that time the ruling people would say, you don't have responsibility to anybody who's outside of the family. And you might have, you know, a patriarch or matriarch who teaches you that, you know, family is everything. You don't have to have no kind of allegiance to anybody outside of family. And so that is how the dictators, the conquerors were able to isolate people from themselves as well as from their neighbors. And so then people would decide that you were an enemy based on your activities. Oh, we do that today. We do that today because we say, okay, you know, well, you're of that party, or you are of that race, or you're of that particular train of thought that I don't agree with. So back in the time of Jesus the Christ, there were the tax gatherers who represented the head of the Roman authority. And they were pretending to be prosperous because they had a little bit of a title. And so they felt like they had a little bit of an edge over everybody else. And so they were given these positions and prominence, and that it appeared that they had economic status and economic security, right? But there's also ghettos, and those ghettos are where the people appear to love them, but they don't mean to condone their way of life. So in those times there was that idea of there's them and there's us. And if you're not one of these elite people who belong to the state, then you know, you really don't have any value and your life is really not worthy. I don't know how we can do that and continue to feel like we're connected to God. You know, Jesus said, love those who don't agree with the truths that he shared about God, or love the Samaritan, or love the Roman. So what would it be like if we were serving as a vehicle of God, completely devoted to God? Have we ever thought about that? And have we consistently committed to that? I'm not, you know, talking about what I need to know. I'm just asking you to ask yourself that, because at the end, that's all that really matters. If I'm a child of God, Jesus was clear. Baba, our Father, you are the holy. You are the treasured. You are the precious. You know, thy kingdom come. It wasn't about the Romans. It was about, what is God saying in this kingdom for me to know? And so he was awakening that awareness in himself. And anybody else who was tuned into that would follow him because they were attuned to that Christ consciousness, not because they were simply following him, but because they knew the God that he was following. And so if the Roman had some arrogance and power and they were of the dominant group, that didn't give them power in terms of real power. That didn't make Jesus want to follow them or succumb to them. Just simply saying, you know, whatever they accused him of, okay, if you say that, that's, you know, that's your opinion. But I didn't say that, right? And so thinking about all of these conditions that we live in that can feel really arid, dry, devoid of life. You know, those places where we feel like there's a separation, where we're not getting nourished, where we're not getting what we need for life. That is when we are in separation from God. And so what I'm inviting us to know is that only when we are tuned in to the divine energy are we really knowing what love is. And I want to read this from an author that I know just because. Her name is Celeste. It's called At Home Within. I have been asked in quite a bit as of late. Happily, I consent to go on the brief yet full date. I'm not taken anywhere away, but right here at home I would stay. Not living in my living room or even my bath, but where I go is on my own path, into the quiet, the joyful serene, the only location where truth can be seen. Beyond closed doors and darkened rooms, beyond scary ghosts and deserted tombs, into the space of eternal abyss, into the face of perpetual bliss, embracing the quiet, erasing the riot of struggle and strife from my mind, escaping the diet of negative thoughts that entwine the present and future with the past, for time itself doesn't last. So in the now, I make a vow that has no boundaries of space, that has no quandaries of race, consciousness on which to rely, lot or cautiousness to deny, acceptance of all. For there is nothing outside of the all, it's within. And in there is no without. There is no out. So rather than seeking something outside of self, I'd rather be being myself. I'm home, always home. I am at home within. And as I move further and further away from 50, I am moving closer to 70 in my earthly years. And as my body becomes more inconsequential, I see my spirit as the eternal essence of me that I will never lose. Many people who haven't seen me for 6 months or more have noticed that I've lost weight. If you were to lose weight, what would you like to lose first? What is the weight in your life that you would like to lose? Is there anything that ego has brought you that you want to keep? Then I looked at the word evolve as an acronym. And I saw ego verifies only lacking viable essentials. Right? Then while working on this talk, a text came in from the person working on our commemorative journal for celebrating our soul, asking me which New Thought organization is this person affiliated with for the program. And instead of saying who the blank cares, I said, I don't know, ask so-and-so. Now the other day it seemed important, but once you are contemplating evolve, clarity comes and alleviates the non-essential. No vacuum needed, No dust cloth necessary. The excess stuff goes away. Because now that the Little Prince book, that what the Little Prince book said rings loud. What is essential is invisible to the eye. So if you feel disconnected to the concept of people of African descent, New Thought Group, because you don't feel included, consider the fact that we all came from Africa. And ask yourself, who's excluding whom? And this is not a judgment, but a commentary. And I just know that Jesus lived in such a way that he was clear. He didn't throw a fit in the temple because the merchants were defiling the temple. I know that's what everybody says. I believe it was because people were wasting their time being focused on non-essential things. He wanted to elevate veracity, obeying, liberating energy. Elevate veracity, obeying, liberating energy. Evolve. He wanted to listen to love, but there was all this noise in the space. He knew, and we know, that when we become still enough to remember who we are, without the letters, letting love lead, because he knew, and the Christ in us knows, that when we are willing, we can feel love lifting us into an awareness of it. Nothing is more important. No letter, no activity, no attachment than our alignment with our divinity. Our substance does not come by means of our religiosity, nor our denomination, nor our honorific, but through our awareness of the presence. Are you ingesting love or fear? The I am is ready to reveal itself to you. Your next unfoldment, our next unfoldment, is ready to be revealed. Are you ready to let God expand you? I hope so. Reconcile first with your brother before bringing God a gift. Everyone is a child of God. What will you do to awaken their awareness in God? Jesus throwing a fit in the temple shows us to clear our focus so that we are in alignment with what is important. Listen to love even when there's noise in the space, and become still enough to remember who you are. Because it's time for a new thought. Now, thank you.